Fantastic. Okay, so you can see there's a huge spread here today, so that's really exciting. Thanks. Welcome if you're joining. Just grab a seat. So we've been given a topic here called governance, access, and poverty, which is like it really is a PhD thesis, maybe several PhD theses. So we'll try to make the best out of the time that we've got. We've got about an hour and a half to talk about these very broad issues. So first of all, maybe just to touch on the issue of governance and what we mean by that. It's obviously a very, it's a term people toss around, but nobody really understands what it means. So I think I want to propose that for the purpose of this conversation, we refer to governance as essentially the way that we implement policy, right? It's the rules, the laws and regulation, the institutions that we need at different spheres of government, but also outside of government, institutions that we have in the private sector and civil society, at community level, within business, to help us to implement policy and decisions, and then the systems and processes that we design to make that implementation happen. You heard at the end of the last session, there was a lot of reference to implementation, enough talking, time for implementation. And at the same time, of course, it's the one thing that we're not so great at in South Africa, actually, is getting the implementation right. So the governance is going to be very important. All of this is unfolding in, not an ideal environment. I think we should acknowledge that up front in relation to our internal capacity in terms of policy incoherence and all of these issues of trust that you heard referenced in the previous session. So some of the issues we're going to be touching on today, just to give you get your mind going, because it's such a broad topic, we're going to be touching on a lot of issues. The role of the state in all of this, particularly also in the context of the Eskom unbundling, the independent grid operator, how is that going to play out, how are we going to organize that, and how will that affect the implementation of the policy. Lots of concerns about privatization that come up in all of these conversations. Local government, what is the role of local government? You heard our commissioner from local government speaking very passionately about that in the first panel. The role of specific departments. If you look at the electricity planning recommendations, you'll see it does a whole analysis of all the institutions involved in electricity governance. And it's a lot. It's a lot of different, often contradictory departments, or departments with contradictory mandates. We've got a huge elephant in the room, which is that we're talking about electricity. On the one hand, of course, we've got load shedding and we don't have security of supply, but electricity is also inaccessible and inaffordable to many, many South Africans. In a short while, we're going to give Dr. Tracy Ledger a moment to give us a short presentation on some of the work that she's been doing around that. Tariffs and pricing, municipal cost recovery, the issues we also touched on in the panel, the access of poorer households to renewable energy through rooftop solar, different models of ownership, so not just accessing electricity, but also accessing benefits out of the transition to renewables. Free basic electricity, we'll talk more about that, the role of that in poverty alleviation, and then of course crime and corruption, a big feature of all of these conversations. And then all of this, of course, has to play out in the context of the concepts of justice that we've developed as part of the Just Transition Framework. That was the big output of the Presidential Climate Commission last year, talking about procedural justice, how people affected by the transition must be involved in the design and decision-making and the implementation of the transition. The distributive justice, the benefits and the opportunities and the risks must be equally shared amongst those affected and all the stakeholders, and not just by some, so that in fact we exacerbate inequality. And then restorative justice, how do we make up for the damage done by the fossil fuel industry over the last 50, 60, 70 years in terms of people's health impact, in terms of land, in terms of environmental degradation, water pollution, all of those issues. So yeah, I think we've got our work cut out for us. So we're going to start off with a short presentation by Dr. Tracy Ledger. She is the head of the Energy Transition Program at the Public Affairs Research Institute, PARI, which is a research institute with both WITS and University of Johannesburg. So she's going to talk to us first about some of her research. All right, thanks. It's not for short people, this mic.
Hello, everyone. So it is a very wide topic. I'm only going to talk for 15 minutes, and I'm just going to touch on some of the issues, and hopefully that'll be a good basis for conversation. I'm not going to talk about anything I don't know anything about, hopefully. So let's have a look at starting off with the issue of justice. So the just energy transition has got a very wide definition of justice. It talks about different kinds of justice, but the question we'd like to ask is, does it really fully incorporate the goal of moving to a more equitable energy system, as opposed to only addressing the mitigation of the transition? And that's not to suggest that mitigating the negative impact of the transition is not important. It is, of course, critically important. But sometimes that sort of implies that our current energy system, that it's got no problem with it. It's just got a problem about where the power comes from. But we have a fundamentally inequitable energy system, specifically in the ability of people to be able to access energy, and notably electricity, which is critical for their ability to improve their lives. So the data shows quite clearly households that have got access to electricity that they can afford to use are 3 times more likely to start a small business than those who don't. People use electricity to improve their ability to earn income from existing businesses, to engage in higher value added activities, especially in the agricultural value chain. Access to clean and safe energy is critically interlinked with household food security. What the data shows is that poor households in South Africa, the main item that they sacrifice expenditure on to pay for electricity is food. The work that Black Sash did on recipients of childcare grants show that the main item that those households are borrowing money for is to pay for electricity. So when people are not able to afford electricity, it greatly limits their ability to engage in economic activity, and it's directly related to household food insecurity and child malnutrition status, as well as health. So the bottom line is that for the majority of South Africans, access to electricity is the energy priority. For the majority of South Africans who live outside of coal areas, who are not employed in the coal value chain, they perceive the inequalities and the inequities of the energy system through their ability to be able to access clean and safe energy. So we have to ask ourselves whether this just part of the transition is actually meaningful for every single South African, because for the majority of them, it's only meaningful if it directly impacts their ability to access electricity. Now, the factors that affect access to electricity are people's physical access, the reliability of the service, and their ability to afford to pay for it. So although we have a high household electrification rate, around 87%, which is much higher than any other country in sub-Saharan Africa and much higher than most developing countries, energy poverty levels are still high. And that means that we need to understand that energy poverty is actually much more about households that are already connected to the grid than it is just about households who are not connected to the grid. So we need to stop thinking that we've solved the energy access problem if we give someone a plug in their house. And the critical issue there is affordability. And when we think about affordability, we need to think about affordability of what? There's a certain minimum amount of electricity that a household needs in order to be able to leverage the benefits of electricity. And you could sort of argue where that is. Our work has suggested that is at a minimum household consumption level of 350 kilowatt hours per month. So the question is, when we look at affordability, is not to think how much households are paying on electricity, but whether they can afford to buy that amount of electricity that will improve their lives. And against that context, let's remember that 25%, 4.5 million South African households live below the food poverty line. And that means that their total monthly income is not sufficient to buy a minimum basket of food. For those households, no tariff is affordable, because when we are asking households to sacrifice food to buy electricity, we're scoring a terrible own goal, because we're undermining many of our other development objectives by asking people to pay for affordability. So in this way, electricity doesn't become an enabler of socioeconomic development. It actually becomes a way of keeping people in poverty and entrenching inequality. And the critical role of the state, we would say, is to create the regulatory framework and to allocate resources that ensures that low-income households are guaranteed the minimum requirement of electricity. And I know people do, I doubt anyone in this room would, but people do hop up and down at me and say, oh, well, you see, poor people just want something for nothing. We need to understand that electricity is not just a something. It is as much a facilitator of economic development and increased standards of living in the poorest households as it is a facilitator for private business. So we talk a lot about how we need to ensure that there's access to low-cost, affordable and reliable electricity for business, but we need to understand that households have exactly the same requirement. We need to start thinking about electricity the same way we think about education. We understand that even though the benefits of education accrue to individuals, there's a wider social benefit to everyone if we make sure that everybody can access a quality education. So one of the governance issues is this area around cost-reflective tariffs and affordability. And on the one hand, there's pressure for us to have cost-reflective tariffs. On the other hand, people are saying we can't have cost-reflective tariffs because people can't afford to pay them. I would suggest that these are actually two completely different policy issues. There are very good governance reasons why we should have accurate costs of supply for the cost of supplying electricity, whether it's from the state utility or particularly in local municipalities. We need to know where costs are being incurred. If the cost includes a 30% technical loss rate, we need to know that so that we can do something about it. If it includes lots of inflated procurement, we need to know about it so that we can do something about it. In exactly the same way in the public healthcare sector, we need to know how much it costs to take someone's appendix out, not because we want everyone to pay for it, but because it is good to make sure that public resources are used in the most efficient and effective manner. So we should have accurate cost of supply studies. We should try and have those costs as low as possible, and we should have tariffs that reflect the cost of supplying something. That is not the same thing as saying that a poor household must pay those tariffs. Those are two completely different issues. Just as we would say in the public education system, we want to know what is the cost of getting a child from grade, I don't know, where do children start now? I don't know, grade 6 noughts or something, up to grade 12. That's not so that everybody can pay for it. We understand that people that can't afford to access the education need to be subsidized in it. So I do think that there is a direct link between a least cost supply model and a more equitable energy system. The cheaper it is to supply electricity, the cheaper it is for the state to make sure that people can afford more electricity. It's much cheaper for the fiscus to finance 200 free kilowatt hours of electricity for a household every month at a certain rate than it is to finance it at a higher rate. So we need to understand that there is a direct link between having a least cost electricity system and in fact being able to afford much more subsidies for poor households. And then of course all the other benefits that go with, lower electricity costs. Just briefly on local government, I think that local government, which sometimes gets left out of the argument, as everyone who is from local government will agree, I think, is that local government is central to any solution in a successful energy transition, and there are a number of reasons for that. So local government directly supplies about 50% of South African households. The rest are supplied by Eskom, and that is, a lot of that is from rural areas and the old township electrification programs. And they also supply a significant number of businesses, especially smaller businesses. So the quality of electricity that these customers get is directly impacted by the quality of the grid. I think in Joburg, the figure is that once we kind of get below stage 3 load shedding, we have more power outages because of the ancient and falling over grid than we have from load shedding. So addressing the local government distribution grid is also critical to any sustainable load shedding issue. The infrastructure maintenance backlog across local government is huge. It's hundreds of billions of rands, probably most in water and sanitation, but likely between 150 and 200 billion rand in electricity distribution alone. For context, total operating expenditure across all of local government is about 450 billion rand. The problem is that we've got a local government fiscal framework that assumes that local municipalities can pay for maintenance of infrastructure out of own revenue. There's absolutely no way that hundreds of billions of rands in infrastructure maintenance is going to be paid for out of own revenue. We also need a significantly upgraded grid to leverage the benefits of the future energy system. Dispersed sources of generation, embedded generation, distributed generation, rooftop solar, what have you. We need a different kind of grid. And then also local government is responsible for the implementation of the free basic electricity, which they do extremely badly. National government finances 11 million households to receive the benefit. Only 2.5 million households actually receive the benefit. So this is an issue as well. If we have a fully funded program to support poor households, there's somewhere around 15 billion rands worth of benefits every year that is intended for the poorest households in South Africa that they don't receive. The numbers for water and sanitation are rather terrifyingly quite similar. So there are multiple challenges to be overcome in order for local government to be able to fulfill its role in an energy transition. First of all, we need funding. How much longer have I got? Oh, okay. we need funding. And in theory, the JET-P offers a solution for this, or the JET-IP, because this is the first document, the first policy document in the history of post-1994 South Africa, which says that infrastructure maintenance, upgrading, and renewal is going to be funded from a source outside of local government. So it's a significant step in understanding that if we don't have an external source of funding for this, nothing is going to happen. The issue now is what is going to be done with that funding. What is a solution going to look like? How are municipalities going to be assisted in spending that money? There's a 200 billion rand line item in the JET-IP for local government infrastructure. Total spend on infrastructure upgrading, renewable, repairs and maintenance across all of the metros last year was only about 6 billion rand. So there's a very, very low capacity to be able to absorb this funding in local government, and we have to ask questions about the skills that are available in designing and envisaging this new grid that we need. The local government revenue model is very problematic because it is based not just on cross-subsidization, but it's based on the assumption that 37% of local government's total operating expenditure requirements, that's repairs and maintenance, unfunded mandates, local economic development, staff, etc., will be funded out of the surplus that is made on electricity sales. So we've created this situation where local government can only function if it extracts an enormous surplus out of electricity. And the reality is that electricity has become the balancing item in a local government budget. Local municipality is not allowed to have an unfunded budget. You know, Jan Hutting's going to come cause trouble there. And so the point is that it's very difficult in many instances for municipalities to collect water revenue. A large part of that has got to do with the fact that Eskom supplies electricity in many low-income areas. Electricity disconnection is what you use for credit control to get people to pay their accounts. The main issue is that the entire local government revenue model is dependent on tens of millions of desperately poor households paying for services that they don't have money to pay for. We have a 55% household poverty rate in this country. So in many municipalities, especially smaller, more rural municipalities where you've got a 60-70% indigent rate, you're expecting almost the entire expenses of the municipality to be paid for by people who really don't have money to pay for the services. And it is electricity tariffs that have have carried the brunt of that. So what we have is we're supposed to have developmental local government, but the local government revenue model in general, and particularly around electricity, is in fact in many instances making it more difficult for people to engage in economic activity and making it more difficult for people to use electricity to improve their standards of living. So the bottom line is that we cannot separate an effective local government electricity system from an effective local government system. Whether that refers to capacity, governance, or the local government fiscal framework, we need to understand that if we don't address some of the underlying structural issues in local government, we're going to find it very hard to implement the kind of electricity system that we'd like to have in 10 or 20 or 5 years' time. The last thing I want to talk about under governance is what we would call a transition-capable state. So the state is critical to our future electricity system. No matter the involvement of the private sector, the state fills an important role in terms of regulation, governance, and as participant in the sector. The issue, of course, is that South Africa is a low-capability state in many areas, not in all areas, but in many critical areas. The South African state is a low-capability state. And we need to recognize that. And what that implies is that it's not enough just to have policy and to have money. If you've got a state that has actually got a low capability to implement the policy and to ensure that the funding is correctly allocated. So in addition to the capability of local government, which we've already talked about, and just a note on that word capability, people often talk about state capacity. We like the word capability, and we'd use it to include everything that determines the ability to get something done. So it includes issues like politics, popular opinion, as well as more technical issues around how organizations are run. So there are key areas of the state that need to function better, or in some cases a whole lot better, in order for us to have a state that is genuinely capable of implementing a transition. This is not an exhaustive list, but they include the institutional arrangements. Melissa referred to that, particularly with respect to who has a mandate to do what. And what we have is we have some situations where there are overlapping mandates, but we also have some areas where actually no one is responsible for doing things. And this is not just key to effective implementation, but it's also key to effective oversight and accountability. If kind of everybody's responsible for doing something, then nobody is. But as I said, there are gaps, particularly in respect of what local government does in the sector, where it doesn't appear as if anyone is really responsible, or those entities that are responsible are not, living up to their obligations. We need to improve our capability in terms of regulation, the kind of regulation we have, the speed at which we can implement regulations, the transparency of that regulation, the reasons for decisions, kind of putting nurse in the spotlight there in many things. Procurement is an issue across the state. We all know that. The state is going to have to procure a vast number of things, whether it's upgrading the local government distribution infrastructure grid, whether it is new generation capacity and all sorts of other things, and we need a much better and more effective procurement system. The ability to implement things, to get things done, and particularly in the South African context, where you've got, in some places, in a municipality, you'll have the municipality's got authority over some things, the province has got authority over some things, National's got authority over some things, Eskom's got authority over some things. Then there are other state organizations that are involved, and just kind of getting people to coordinate and organize themselves to get things done in an effective and efficient fashion. And then the last thing, and I think that this talks to the issue of procedural justice, one of the areas where the state does have low capability, I would say, is in the kind of collaborative problem solving that an energy transition requires. And we have this, we see this problem all over, that when the state consults with people on a plan, and I'm not talking about the jet here, I'm talking about other kinds of policies and things here. The normal practice is to say, let's say the city of Joburg says they're going to present their budget for consultation. They're not presenting the budget for consultation, they're saying, here's our budget, like it or leave it. And the same thing happens on other plans. So the right to agree is not the same as the right to participate. And the other thing is that what people are being asked to agree on or notionally participate in is the solution. Whereas the reality is that we need to spend much more time agreeing what the problem is. So energy poverty has remained largely invisible in this country because we've bracketed what we think are the energy issues in this country. We do that in a lot of other spaces as well. Somebody else goes and decides what the problem is and what a good solution is, and then we get to vote on whether we like the solution. Nobody ever asks us if we thought it was the right problem that we are talking about. So we need to develop much more capability in this kind of collaborative problem identification and collaborative problem solving. And then, you know, the solution is whatever solves the problem the best. We don't have to have ideological fights about the solution. If we've all agreed what the problem is, then the solution is what fits the problem best. And I would say with a much wider group of stakeholders. Okay, well, I'm going to stop talking.
All right, so that's quite a sober reflection on the state of play. So, you know, I guess the question that Dr. Ledger is posing to us is how one can use the transition to fix some of these inequalities and inequities and dysfunctions in the system. You know, can we do that in a collaborative way? Can we design systems that build and grow our capacity, right? To implement what we're trying to achieve. And then I think the broader question is whether these recommendations that the PCC has put forward progress some of these issues and concerns. I just want to check first if there are questions for Dr. Ledger here. Can you, if there are people or comments or responding specifically to her presentation? Yes, Richard in the back there.
Thanks. The question really relates to this recognition of a minimum level of energy services that are necessary for households to participate socioeconomically and overcome things like childhood stunting that were left. Do you think it would be useful for a forum like this to actually endorse the setting at a national level of a minimum threshold level of consumption that should be recognized as something that is required, implicit, if you like, in basic rights in the Constitution? The one Perry publication suggested 350 kilowatt hours per month. It seems to me that this gathering could endorse setting that as a national benchmark. What ought to be achieved if we're serious about enabling all of society to participate, that level of energy service should be guaranteed to all? Do you think that the 350 is a feasible level to do that? And do you think that would provide the basis for some of the other things you've said we need?
Do you want? Sorry, just 1 second.
No, mine is just a comment.
Okay.
Please, could everyone just stay where they're from and their name again before they ask
Okay, for the purpose of the record. Richard, just
Apologies, that was Richard Worthington, Project 90 by 2030. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Tracy, would you like us to take a few questions and then, and then we answer that? Who was the next person? I heard a voice here. Sorry, I didn't see the order in which they went up. I'm going to start with the gentleman in the red shirt, please. Yeah. Just make sure your microphone is on. Yeah, there we go.
I've got an assistant here.
And just remember to introduce yourself again. Sorry.
Thank you so much, Chair. No, my name is, I'm still that Sifiso Zacharias. That is my surname. Sifiso Zacharias.
Yes.
I don't know, Chair, how I should put this one, whether it's a question or a comment, or I don't know what to say, but I want to believe that this bunch of great people that are in this room here will assist to put it in a correct way where it fits. But however, Chair, I'm from the organized labor. It happened that I am the provincial deputy chairperson of SAMU in the most affected province in Mpumalanga. I represent municipal workers as I am here and all workers in the country for that matter, because I'm also the PC member of COSATU. Look, Chair, we are concerned as the organized labor, particularly in the municipal sector. We have seen the manner in which and the pace all these developments are happening, and they are busy rolling, unfolding before our eyes in the local government sector. And we are not brought into confidence. I want to strongly submit in this house that I'm making a clarion call to all members of this commission to say we are waving a white flag actually, to say we're making a very huge mistake. You cannot leave such an important stakeholder behind. Municipal workers or local government sector is left behind on these things. See, today we're speaking of recommendations, blah, 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 and all of those things. Where was the consultative process? When was it conducted? To who? And largely, who is the most stakeholder that is going to be impacted here? And who is the biggest client of ESCOM? Again, who buys lots of electricity from ESCOM? It's municipalities. Will inherit all the risk and impacts and everything after these things, they don't move in a correct way. It's the municipal sector that is going to drown. And after that, we will be targeted as municipal workers, will be called as failures, as we always take the blame. They are not working, they are not doing what, and all of those things. But when the processes of consultations, so that our views can be heard as well, we're not given that opportunity. And I thought I should register that, yeah, I would rather be unpopular, it's fine. But we are nowhere in these things. I'm happy today, I've heard the Honorable the Executive Mayor, she was invited, I don't know who thought of inviting her this time, to say at least let us hear the voice from the local government. And she has represented us very well. I appreciate you, the Honorable the Executive Mayor. Because that's where the impact is. You see, we're talking here, but what we're saying here theoretically, vis-a-vis the reality down there on the ground, it's something else. And again, this train is moving, as one said. Yes, it's a noble thing. It's a noble call to say, let us try and deal with the issues of carbon emissions and all of those. It's a noble call. But the manner in which it's conducted and the driver of this vehicle remains a concern to us. It remains a concern to us. I'm sitting with workers at Komati that have got no jobs. In fact, we've started with things that were supposed to be the last on our agenda. We've started by decommissioning power stations, and we did not upskill and reskill workers. Now, as I'm closing, maybe because I must give to my other colleagues to compliment and to add, and maybe at some point heal me from this point where I'm drowning in pain and all of that. Maybe I'll find healing here. Because you see, a lot of people, they spoke. Lots of panel members, they spoke, and everybody have got their own ideas. Yeah, you know what, these issues of what's his name, nuclear energy is not going to help us and all of those things. Whereas we are sitting with a wealth record, Chair, a wealth record of Kubek Power Station, that it has run for more than 290-something days, uninterrupted. A wealth record. But today we're saying, no, a nuclear power station, no, that one, it must move away, block it in whatever way. And we're having lots of NGOs that are benefiting from that 8.5 billion to come and tell us here to say our coal is not good anymore. what must we do with this coal? While on the other hand, Chair, we're not honest to each other. While on the other hand, when you go to N2 in Mpumalanga, moving to KZN, accidents are happening every day there, Chairperson, with whole lots of trucks flogging their way to Richards Bay, and others on the other side to Mozambique, exporting our coal. And if I can ask you today to say, have we regulated to even say how much of coal should leave South Africa and how much of coal we should get here? Nobody can answer me in this room. It's not even regulated. Now, on the other hand, we therefore supply the cheapest and the wrong coal to Eskom, so that Eskom can die and collapse. We know this agenda where it's coming from. We just kept quiet. And when we probe and say, kindly come closer, let us investigate this collapse of Eskom to say, is it man-made or is it just a natural cause? What is happening? You won't find an answer. And we're running away from the point of corruption and fraud at Eskom. We will speak about these recommendations. So I was going through them. In fact, I said, you know what, I'm not going to waste my time and speak about these recommendations because we even put a stop onto them as COSATU. We said, what is the rush? Come and consult us properly. Let us go on the ground to the relevant people. Let us get their views, the people that are faced with these things. But we are here on a tick box exercise again, so that tomorrow we can be told that, no, we've consulted you. We must be careful. We must be careful. They're pushing us. And Chair, it's not true to say South Africa is emitting. It's not true. We must not be misled. South Africa is emitting less than 1%. Somebody will say it's not true. Somebody will say it's not true. And these issues of climate change and all that, it's very complex. Must not because there is an agenda that has been driven by West to therefore find ourselves in tatters and move around as if we would like headless chicken. No, Chair. Let us confront this particular agenda in a correct way. Yes, as I've said, that it is a noble call, yes, we agree, and we commit to the Paris agreement of the year 2050. But Chairperson, issue of KZN, on another platform, I've asked this to say, why can't our government, our national government at the military level and at the state security, go and investigate the floods of KZN? You'll come back with different results. Those things were man-made. Those things were man-made. It's fine, I can be targeted and all of those things. I like to be unpopular. Man-made. We said, go and investigate this hub system, this weaponized system of US and the Western countries, of terrorizing African countries with these weather conditions and all of those things. It's there. But nobody seems to want to come closer to that. What they've done to Turkey. What happened to Turkey? Same thing. It's an earthquake and all of those things and whatever. It's not. Same here in South Africa because somebody is after our coal. Why are they reversing? Why are they rethinking of going back to fossil fuel, of banning coal again? They are busy building power stations again.
Can I ask you to just sort of
In
conclude?
conclusion,
Okay, so we can give other people some chances, but yes.
In conclusion, Chair, there is a family. This family, there was a young man who wanted now to therefore become a man and start his own family. And he approached his father. He said to his father, I have seen a beautiful woman dead, and I want to marry that woman. And the father asked, my son, who is that woman? And the son responded and said, it's the girl next door. And the father said, come here, my son, I need to talk to you. I think it's time that I tell you this. And the father said, my son, I don't think it will be a good idea for you to marry that woman. And the boy asked to say, but why? She's beautiful, she's intelligent, she's respectful, she's got all the qualities there. Why are you discouraging me? And the father said, because she is your sister. But do not tell your mother. Father to son, I will share this to you. Please keep that with you. And the father went, the son went, very disturbed. He went and confronted the mother, separate. And then he said to the mother, Mom, there is a woman that I want to marry. I'm sorry, Chair, I'm concluding. There's a woman that I want to marry. And the mother asked, who is the woman, my son? I'm happy that I'm going to have a daughter-in-law. And the son said, it is the girl next door. But what worries me the most, Mom, is that he could not keep up with the secret now, the son. He said, Dad said, that woman that I want to marry next door, it's my biological sister. And the mother responded and said, sure, my son. You know what? I think you should carry on and marry that woman. Because, my son, don't tell your father this, that you are not his son. This story left the son very disturbed and confused and destroyed, not knowing what to do. That's where we find ourselves as workers in this country and as the people of South Africa, all of us. That's where we find ourselves because our government and the relations that they have with these Western countries, there is no truth in this whole thing. There is no truth in this whole thing. That is what I thought I should share as I'm closing, Chair. Thank you.
Thanks, Comrade Professor. We appreciate those thoughts. He's raised a lot of quite serious issues, and I think there are lots of people in the audience who can respond to that. I want to just take one more comment, and then we'll just give Dr. Ledger a chance to respond, but then we can start the broader conversation. Yes, over here. Yes, one comment. Is it still about the presentation, or is it
It's
now
going to be about the
just a
presentation.
free-for-all? About the presentation.
Yeah,
Okay.
thank you so much. Thank you for that elation. My name is Andy Lemlambo from the Grassroots for Climate Action. So my question is about the SA low capability state that you mentioned. And I just wanted to get an idea of how do you measure that, especially our country having a dual economy and us dealing with inequality. So if how do we measure that? And I'm speaking this in relation to the recommendations and the JED-IP, so that I like the point that you made about identifying the right problem. So the question is, how do you measure that? So that if we know that, we can identify the right problem that can help us. So when we come to the rolling out of the JED-IP finances, we would know this is the right problem, this is where we start, and address, very importantly, as we were speaking about the procedural justice, the inequality problem. Because if we're saying we're having a low capability state, who are we speaking about? Are we speaking at the municipal level or at the national level? Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions about the presentation? Then maybe, okay, another one there, all right, sorry.
Hello. My name is Ntabi Singh Mabetlela, and I'm from the Youth Policy Committee at Youth at SIRE. And I just want to touch on the point of how Johannesburg has, ailing infrastructure. Now, this is problematic because even if we have so much renewable energy or any other source of energy, preferably renewable, being, put into the grid, if we have ailing infrastructure, that is not going to benefit communities that, for example, do not come from high-income communities. So I live in an area that is not low income, but we have ailing infrastructure, and it's so bad that last year we had over 300 hours, at least 300 hours of unscheduled power cuts. And what we see is that you have, City Power, for example, they try their best to help everyone else get connected back into the grid. That takes days. And I remember we sat for 4 days with no electricity. People had to throw away their food. They had to, children had to go to school and bathing with cold water. So how do we now, tackle this issue of power stations that get vandalized, or transformers that blow up, or wires, copper wires that get stolen? How do we address that? Because if we don't, we can have the best solution, but if we don't know how to take that solution to households, it's going to affect our whole plan. And in the South African Youth Climate Action Plan that we launched in 2021, we spoke about the importance of collaboration within a community, using local manufacturers, and having a network of national energy experts so that energy projects are managed locally. So now how do we address the problem of failing infrastructure when we are trying to bring renewable energy into the grid and help communities that are faced by energy insecurity? And how do we make sure that the way we do this is not in a one-size-fits-all plan, but instead we are trying to work with local businesses and organizations so that they can benefit from these energy projects? Thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks, Ntabiseng. Okay, it's all about the presentation. Okay, you go first, and then I'll give an opportunity to go back.
Thank you, Chair. And my name is Chalma Hlang from Organized Labour, as I've said. On the presentation, 2 quick questions. I didn't hear you talking about transparency in the context of the trust deficit that exists if we are to take this project forward. If you could comment on that, because otherwise we will still have the very same conversation and not moving anywhere. 2, with regard to low capability state, what are the contributing factors here? Is the fact that those who are filthy rich are able to buy generators for themselves, and politicians, cabinet in particular, at our own expense, are then provided with generators, and therefore the policy formulation goes to the south? Is that not an issue for us to have a capable state in the context of your presentation? And lastly, maybe the next session, Chairperson, should be between Matla, Henrina, Komati, and all of those power stations, so that as we sit in Johannesburg and Pretoria and our beautiful cities, we theorize from an understanding of how poor those communities are and how devastated those communities are. And as we talk about decommissioning, we can appreciate and understand the levels of poverties in the context of a Freedom Month. I think we'll have a better understanding. But for as long as we have them here, who cares? I mean, we have no clue in understanding what the kind of challenges are there in those parts of the countries. Thank you.
Yeah, point well made. Thank you, Conrad. Okay, I'm going to take one more comment, and then we're going to end this round, and we'll start opening up for other things. There was the woman in the back there. Yeah. Thanks. Just remember to introduce yourself.
Okay, mine is not a question per se, but more of more in support. My name is Cynthia, and I'm from Greenpeace Africa, Climate and Energy Community Engagement. I just want to support the recommendation that PCC has made, where you say that there's need to conduct a presidential-sponsored and independent study on electricity pricing reform in South Africa and how it can support a just energy transition, including energy access and energy poverty. I just want to start off by saying that, yes, we do need an independent study on electricity pricing and tariffs. But the key takeaway is that we need civil society and community groupings to be involved in the drafting of the terms of reference for such a study. I think that's my submission for today. Thank you.
Thanks. That's a very practical suggestion. Thank you so much. Tracy, do you want to just answer some questions? Yeah.
So thanks for all of those. Yeah, Richard, that minimum threshold level of consumption, which we've estimated at 350 kilowatt hours per household per month, and then the recommendation was that that is a free allocation for households below a certain poverty level. We would automatically include the 4.5 million households that live below the food poverty line in that, but then probably include most of the households that are up to the upper bound poverty line, given that, you know, the actual cost of food in South Africa and the other demands on households. That 350 kilowatt hours per month was an estimate based on existing research. It was for a household of 4 people, but actually Sustainable Energy for All, which is part of the SDG 7, they've calculated a minimum requirement of 1,000 kilowatt hours per person per year. I don't think it's very useful doing electricity on a per person basis, but if you turn that into a 4-person household, it would work out at much the same thing. So yes, I think it would be a great idea to say that is the target in terms of energy access, so that when we look at our energy access data and how we report on that, and particularly how we report on SDG 7, that it's on not just on access to the grid, but on the ability of households to use a certain minimum amount of electricity, which is at 350 kilowatt hours. I also think it would be great if that was a target for free basic electricity. It doesn't have to be something that's implemented tomorrow. We're all aware of the fiscal constraints on the state, but it would be wonderful to have that as a goal, and primarily as a goal for the poorest households, which once again are the households that live below the food poverty line. Not all of those households are connected to the grid, so at the same time we need to have a goal of 100% physical access to the grid. But I think it would be a wonderful recommendation that is the minimum level of free basic electricity that households below the food poverty line require. I think it, you know, as a target, I think it would be wonderful. Sofiso, I'm not even going to try and address everything that you said, but just one point on local government. Yes, I mean, I agree with you that local government is a real issue, and local government is central to getting a lot of these things done. And you know, in Mpumalanga, you go to a place like Malahleni. I mean, that municipality is broken. I mean, it's an absolute disaster zone. And if that municipality does not reach a certain minimum level of capability, it cannot in any way contribute to any of the just transition things that need to be done that involve local municipalities, supporting small business development, creating a conducive economic environment. I mean, the parts of Malahleni where no water's come out the taps for years and years. So, you know, I think that there really is an issue of getting local government involved and understanding that addressing the issues of local government cannot be separated, and not just in Mpumalanga, but especially in Mpumalanga, they cannot be separated from getting the just transition done. It's not just a national government Eskom issue. It is very much about understanding that those municipalities in Mpumalanga have to be functional for these things to work. On a wider level, and other people have talked about this idea of, you know, participation and who is involved and organized labor, saying these things. I think from a local government point of view, I mean, there is a section in the JET IP for local government, but it is just a line item. There's no detailed plan for what needs to be done here. So going forward, there is a wonderful opportunity for us, in fact, to build a kind of much more collaborative problem-solving approach with respect to what is actually going to be done in local government. I mean, the JET IP sets out sort of a high-level problem of what is in local government, and it makes an estimate of how much money is required, but it has no details on what needs to be done. So there's a wonderful opportunity in the local government space, in the energy transition, for us, in fact, to do something that is extremely collaborative. And once again, that doesn't involve just Mpumalanga, but the wider local government. In terms of the low capability state, and how do you measure capability? I would say capability is everything that you need to be able to do to get something done. and it's context driven. So if what you want to do is to ensure that 10,000 households get a certain quality of water consistently 365 days a year, what do you need to be able to do that? What technical skills do you need? What infrastructure do you need? What community participation do you need? What do you need to develop a plan that everybody buys into, et cetera, et cetera? So it is all the things that need to be in place in order for the state to be able to do something. So it's an empirical question. You go and say, all right, this is what the state needs to do. What does the state need in order to be able to do that? And that's either resources, or it's a particular political dispensation, it's a certain kind of governance structure, it's a certain kind of oversight structure. It is what is needed to address that particular problem. So, and then when people said, what is this collaborative problem solving, what is the right problem that we want to solve? Well, that's something that is negotiated. Sometimes, your idea of what the problem is not the same as someone else's idea of what the problem is. And the idea is for everybody to get together and have a joint understanding of what is the problem that needs to be solved and what is it that we are trying to achieve and what is going wrong. And this is where consultation with communities, workers, local small businesses is so incredibly valuable. You cannot, as an outsider, look into a municipality. I can't, even though I've worked in a lot of municipalities in South Africa, I can't look at Swelopele and say, oh, that's what's wrong in that municipality. It's a question of going there and listening and understanding and talking to as many people as possible to get an idea of what is happening or not happening in that municipality. I mean, in Tabaseng, I take your point. I mean, I also live in Joburg, and I mean, the longest we've had no power in my suburb is 7 days so far. So, this is the thing, is that the local government distribution infrastructure is critical, not just to the energy transition, but it's actually critical to addressing load shedding. Load shedding isn't just about the energy availability factor of Eskom or how much new generation capacity we get on the grid. When there is actually electricity, vast percentages of what is supposed to be the economic center of South Africa don't have power because the grid has fallen over, because there's just no capacity or funding to upgrade the grid. I mean, I don't know what your grid looks like, but my grid looks like, someone put it together with sticky tape and rubber bands, because it's been there for forever, and it's never upgraded. And as soon as there's a storm, everything falls over. And then, of course, you do create these opportunities for theft and vandalism. So, the local government distribution infrastructure grid needs to be much more important to our long-term electricity solutions, I think, than it currently is. Thanks. Stop there.
Great. All right, thanks, Dr. Ledger. So we've got half an hour left now. We've got a whole lot of issues to discuss, and so I'm proposing that we do a slightly different format. I know there were quite a few people with hands up, so we're going to give people like about 2 minutes to make your point, so we don't have, people taking up more than, because we want to hear lots of voices on these topics, and it's a very broad field. So can I get some hands of people who wanted to speak? There's one here. See Promise in the back. Okay, all of these people. So I'm going to give you 2 minutes. I'm going to just give you a wave when it's over. Okay, so we can hear from different people. And I think, Bobby, you also wanted to say, oh no, okay. All right, I'm going to start over here, and then we're going to go around. All right, off you go.
Good afternoon. My name is Marcia, and I'm a freelance journalist. So my question is around the issue of food security or food insecurity, whichever way you want to look at it. How then are we going to get a balance where there is access to electricity and that people who are already struggling to keep up with the current state when it comes to access to nutritious food and access to electricity and water are not left behind, and that their lives do not get further affected by all of these changes that are happening, and they're not even aware that there are such conversations where there's talks about moving away from coal to other forms of energy. I mean, currently with the Eskom issue, there is talks around people buying solar panels, but even that is expensive for a lot of households. So the balance then in ensuring that, yes, we are in a crisis where climate change needs to be addressed and just transition needs to happen, but what about the people who these discussions are happening about, but they do not even know that they are happening. Thank you.
Great. Thanks for that. Over there.
Yeah, I won't be a long time. I think most of the issues have been covered already. But the prime issue, I think, is that electricity is unaffordable to most of our households. And that points to we should be supporting the least cost investment into new generation and into new distribution and transmission infrastructure. And I think it might be important that that message also comes out of this commission.
Yeah.
Apart from the fact that building a more inclusive economy is also going to be fundamental to addressing this. Thanks.
Great. Just remind us who you are. I don't remember you introducing yourself.
Laser Encounter from City of Cape Town.
Oh, yes, of course. Sorry. Thank you. Promise?
My name is Promise Mabilo from Emalahleni. For my side and my thinking and looking into what is happening and all the discussions that we had, the public participation that we had, and looking into the local government space, it becomes very, very, very difficult to think of, as communities, to think of a municipality that will be producing electricity for us as communities. But what we feel is gonna be just for communities, as we are in the space of not even able to buy electricity because the electricity is very, very, very much expensive. We can't afford. So what we feel that will be just for us as communities is to make sure that we as communities, we build up ourselves, we do things for ourselves, we make sure that we provide electricity that is cheap for us as communities, and the municipality, as they are our providers in terms of service delivery, they will be assisting in terms of overseeing the processes and guiding. Because what is happening right now, we are really suffering. Because now the load shedding that is happening, is abnormal. We do agree that we are in the space of reducing emissions and doing whatever that will save our climate. But let us make sure that even though the nationally or the government is looking into the economy and whatever that is taking place, but we are the ones who are suffering the most as communities. We have to cook. We are now not even eating healthy because we are saving the little energy that we have to survive the month. So I think the best way to do this is for communities, let the national and with ESCOM or whoever is in the space of providing energy to separate communities and the local government. The local government can do whatever they want with ESCOM, but let us not suffer in that space as communities. Let it be a ground-up approach. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Promise. Right, who is next? Over here. Is it not working? Maybe just...
I think it's dark.
There we go, there we go.
Okay. Hello, good day everyone. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm Kosnati Kambule from Grassroots for Climate Action and a Child Creatives Hub as well. My question is around the manner and approach of the energy transition and the decarbonization and along those lines. So we have the target that we set it ourselves on the NDCs, which we committed as a country to decarbonize the economy by at least 30% by 2030. But now yes, we should decarbonize the economy, and the current developments that are happening in the energy space, like the previous state of disaster on energy that was there. Now it is no longer in place. We are not very far as decarbonization is concerned. So yes, it's just a comment and a question. You can elaborate on that as well. And on the jet IP, it doesn't speak to, it doesn't have the time frame, because why I'm saying this, as a country we have a culture of not implementing things. So if the JP says it starts from 2023 to 2027 and it doesn't have the exact date, so it might not even be implemented.
That's your 2 minutes, eh? Is that okay? Key points made, hey? All right, fantastic. All right. Oh, sorry, that's my timer here. Apologies. All right. Yes, the woman with the white stripy top. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you. Kamala Mulindi Wakanzwana. Don't worry, Andile will translate for me. Okala nje executive mayor ukhulume ngokuthi when it comes to ama free basic electricity, people are not aba-registered for that service. And to answer that, njengoba umuntu obuya ku community, don't get deceived. The way ngeze ngakhona ngize ePretoria. I'm coming from a community where like abantu bakhona abasebenzi, and I'm part of them, but I'm concerned ngama issues we community. So engikushoyo ukuthi abantu aba-register simply because abayazi ukuthi ikhona lento ebizwa FBE. Information abanayo abantu abahlala ema-location most eyabo. That is why most of the time uzothola ukuthi they are not coming forward by registering. And sometimes kukhulunywe nge capabilities, and motto ya some of amaspala lab uyofuna ukubuza ngama issues afana lawa, and ufika lapha ya umuntu yakumangalela ukuthi wena ukhuluma ngani, but yena usebenza lapha ya. We understand. So ama issues anjalo yiwo ayenza ukuthi ama communities angabi ne information noma banga understand ukuthi baya kuphi kwenzakalani. And executive mayor iqiniso, most yama municipalities ukhuluma nge climate change, ukhuluma ngama policies, they don't have a clue. Iqiniso. Ngibuye futhi abantu in the community hayi ukuthi abafuna ukubhadala electricity. Abantu bayafuna ukubhadala. The only problem ukuthi they cannot afford. Ama tariff increase that's too high for abantu abasebenzi. And recommendation yami when it comes to JITP, ngoba siyabona la municipalities baphiwe ama 200 billions. Sikhuluma ama FBE, ama indigent, and ukuthi ngoba siyazi ukuthi isimo se-Eskom khona manje sime kanjani in terms of electricity. So why singathathi the very same subsidy ye FBE and try ukuthi sifakele ama households la qualifyayo for ama indigents, ama rooftop solars. In that way they are off grid ku system ye Eskom as ngoba sistruggle khona manje. Nyabong.
Thank you. Thanks so much for that. Sandy, do you want to go quickly translate?
Okay, translation. The lady who was speaking is Linda Nzwane. She was addressing what the mayor spoke of earlier on in the first session. And, okay, the first thing was, sorry, because I was trying to keep up. It's about the FBE, free basic electricity, to say, since it's been scrapped, what is the mayor or municipalities, what are they doing now? Huh?
Yes.
She's not saying it's been scrapped. What she's saying is that communities don't have any information about this. So I will respond, I've heard her.
Oh,
I'll
is it?
respond,
Oh,
yes,
okay.
it's fine. She was not saying the FBE has been scrapped. Actually, she's recommending that the money that is for JET IP must be then utilized for putting rooftops on the communities that are indigent. So we'll speak to those issues. Thank you.
And Mayor, on that point, thank you. So where I was going with this, because where I come from in Ekurhuleni, it was scrapped. So I was just putting the whole, giving perspective from what we spoke about.
But you need to interpret what was presented. Don't put your own
Yeah.
words.
Okay, order.
Okay.
Order. Do you want to just conclude quickly? I mean, do we have the general sense of what Linda said, or do you want to, is there something else do people understand what she's saying? Okay, thanks so much, Sandile, we appreciate it, yeah. All right, so we've got 15 minutes left now, so I've got one woman in the front here, yes, do you want to?
Yeah, I'm Hleng Mekhadev. One just to build as well on the solar rooftop PV on low-income households. I think earlier in the session, someone said the transition is happening. It's not something that we are going to jump on. And at the moment, actually, poor people are being left behind because rich people are already putting up solar PVs in their homes. So actually, there needs to be a strong push around putting up solar PV in low-income households, and possibly conducting a study to see how successful it is. Will it benefit low-income households to have solar PVs in their home? And secondly, just on tariffs as well. When I was still in the energy space, one of the studies that we did showed that even mid-income and high-income households were actually being cross-subsidized in the tariffs that they pay. So I think in the studies that the PCC is wanting to do, they should also look into the way the tariffs are currently structured to ensure that only low-income households are benefiting from that. In that way, we ensure that more and more low-income households are benefiting instead of those who don't need it are benefiting from that. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks very much. Some really great recommendations coming in about that study. Edith here is recording all of this. Sorry, Tracy, do you want to say something about that quickly? No, just come for the microphone.
So just quickly on that, because a lot of people have said, what about putting rooftop solar on households? Okay, so let's differentiate between households that don't have access to the grid and households that do have access to the grid. For households that do have access to the grid, it's much, much, much more cost effective to give those households free electricity than to pay for a solar system. Plus the households have got to then pay to insure it, they've got to maintain it, they've got to carry all the costs and risks of that. To give a household 350 kilowatt hours of free electricity every month only costs about 6,000 Rand a year. So the more effective way for getting renewables into households is via utility scale renewables. And then making sure that households can get more free basic electricity. And the municipalities don't want people to know about the free basic electricity, because then they whatever, with all due respect to the mayor, I'm not talking about your municipality in general. And that's why a lot of people that get it from Eskom don't get it, because the municipality is supposed to tell Eskom. The most effective intervention is to give people 350 kilowatt hours of free basic electricity every month that comes from the utility in reliable electricity into their houses. That would be my...
Just to say, I was recommending a pilot because there is a lot of people are pushing for that. So if we were to do a pilot, then we can either prove or disprove this, and people could be satisfied. Yeah.
Sorry, we've got to give turns to people who haven't had a chance to say anything. Hey, so if you've already put your hand down for the moment, okay. In the front here with a red sweater, yeah, red jacket.
Thank you. My name is Portia Mamutame. I come from Impilo Energies. Mine is more of a solution and to bring balance to all the issues that have been alluded in this place. It's the local government, it's the communities. Currently, the local government, I'll speak about the Johannesburg one specifically. They are almost running short of landfills. So what we provide is the waste to energy, where you burn the waste from the landfill, And from the waste, then you can turn it into other measures, whether it can be your cement or any landscaping. And people who will participate there in the surroundings of those communities, because most of these landfills are situated where poverty is stricken, like in townships. So it will at least be a balance of also creating work employment. And also it will be assisting the burden that the local government is carrying in terms of providing other energy mixes. And also the water treatment. You find in townships there are water running all over, sewer waters running all over the place. A lady behind here said something about creating their own solution to energy problems. So one of them is water treatment, that they can also create their energy. So I submit on that. Thank you.
Thanks for that. Okay, I'm gonna, the person with the light hair, the one, you got your hand up, yeah?
Thank you. So it's Simon Mason from the Western Cape Economic Development Partnership, or EDP. Just 3 points, I'll make them very brief. Treasury and Auditor General have previously voiced commitment to improving the tracking of money that should be allocated to FBE by municipalities. And I just wanted to hear an update on that, if we can get a sense of whether that will be in the recommendations to have clear transparency there. Also around the PCC and the social ownership of electricity. I think this has been raised a few times as a real way to make the energy system more just. Where is that at the moment? If we can hear maybe from the commissioners on that. And then lastly, in terms of reducing, I mean, I think often the elephant in the room is the non-payment issue, and often where large consumers aren't up to speed with their payments, and also people that are actually able to afford electricity are not paying for that electricity. And so simultaneously reducing that, as well as increasing the rollout of FBE or increasing the allocation of FBE, is that something viable as a kind of carrot and stick arrangement? And has that been looked at in depth from a kind of financial point of view? Do we have enough estimates of the non-payment, and does that equate to being able to subsidize the FBE more effectively? And then I think just in terms of a collaborative approach, I wanted to support the Greenpeace suggestion on a collaborative terms of reference. And I would wonder if we can perhaps at least get sight of the terms of reference before it does go out. Thank you.
Great. Okay, great. Tracy, there was a specific question out there. Do you want to reply to that? I don't know the answer.
So just briefly, we've engaged with the Auditor General that's committed to start auditing the delivery of the free basic services in municipalities against the national budget allocation in the current year, starting with just FBE in the metros and Umsunduzi, and then rolling it out to other things. So we'll see what that looks like when the MFMA reports come out at the end of May. Yeah, non-payment. You know, I don't like that phrase, culture of non-payment. You know, when you're talking about poor households. But I take your point. But the two things have actually got nothing to do with each other, because free basic electricity is subsidised through the equitable share as a contribution from the national fiscus. It's not paid for by municipalities.
Just on the issue of social ownership, there was, you know, it's obviously in the JET IP, there's a whole allocation for social ownership, and I know that there's been some work happening in the Secretariat. I don't think we have a good sense as commissioners how far that work has come. So, but if there are unanswered questions, please come and speak to us. There's quite a few of us in the room who can maybe answer questions. To other people who haven't spoken, okay, Bobby here in front, who is one of our commissioners.
Hi, I'm Bobby Peake, Commissioner, but I'm speaking as groundwork now. And I just thought to move forward, there are three issues here. There's poverty, access, and governance. On poverty, I think a recommendation should definitely be that we should consider 350 kilowatt hours as a basis with the incline block tariff, so that it's not just two tariffs, but it's an incline block tariff. The more you use, the more you pay. The second thing around access, I think it is important to be able to make sure that the grid is stable at a local government level. So to recommend that there is a type of broad partnership between all spheres of government to assist local government in maintaining and improving their grids, and in terms of access, to get whatever work we do within this process to call for and to work with social ownership models so that that access can be reached out to more people. I think I have a different understanding, Tracy, around rooftop. I think rooftop can work for the entire population if you make it for the entire population, but you don't connect it to the house. So that's, so our rooftop or our energy, our ESCOMs are on our roofs. And that's a bit of a technical debate. And number three, I think in terms of governance, it's really important to recognize, and it's been mentioned a few times, in dealing with governance around electricity, we need to think of it within the context of a just transition, because it's food, it's a decent house where you won't need to, which you will not need to heat in winter. So those are the three types of processes I would like to speak about. And then finally, as groundwork, and I want to be very clear about this, we will not endorse any form of incineration of waste in South Africa, because it will take livelihoods away from waste pickers.
Okay, thanks for that. Geraldine, you wanted to add something?
Thanks. Yes, I'm Geraldine Morris from the Carbon Trust. I just wanted to make a note also around the rooftop solar. And there, I think, again, we just need to think carefully around the capacity issue again. There was a terrible experience with the rollout of the solar geyser program, and with many installed incorrectly, not working, and I understand anecdotally warehouses and warehouses and warehouses that DMRE is paying for storage for those that never got installed to begin with. So a lot of wasteful expenditure there. So again, not necessarily saying yes or no, just I think it's part of the capacity concerns that they need to be thought about. And my other point, which I think actually a few people have already spoken to, was the free basic electricity is not the same as cross-subsidization between different tariff levels and different customer levels. It comes from a different source. I think there will always be a need for cross-subsidization between different classes of customers, but I think what needs to be clear there is the transparency of that and what that looks like. Thanks.
Okay, thanks. I want to, is it a pressing point? You haven't had a chance to speak.
Okay, hi, my name is Mude. I'm from the Climate Action Network South Africa. I know that when the representative from COSATU, Sfiso, spoke about basically he suggested that this whole thing about climate change is a farce, no one really addressed it. But I just want to raise that this continues to be a concern. The more that no one directly responds to such comments, the more that the idea of a conspiracy theory can continue to grow.
Yeah.
So I would suggest, I don't know if there is a political director within the PCC Secretariat to really speak to these issues about this, because there are facts, right? There are facts about the power dynamics between the global north and the global south. But now when we start to mix in ideas about, oh, this is just one great big agenda, then we're definitely treading on dangerous territory, and we have to address this as an element of climate education.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks very much for that point, and I think it's really important. And if you read the report that has been put forward, you'll see there's a whole section dealing with some of the challenges around information and getting accurate information. And it's in all the different sectors, there are different elements of misinformation also that goes around, and it's not helping. I think you're absolutely right. I wanted to just take 1 second to respond to some of those issues while we're at it, because nobody else sort of took it on. And I first want to just say, look, in terms of consultation, Comrade Sfiso, that you raised, I mean, absolutely, consultation is absolutely critical in the work of the Climate Commission. We've actually spent an enormous amount of time in consultations. I don't think it's possible to explain to you how much time between the commissioners, between the Secretariat, has been spent both in online meetings, in-person meetings, traveling to places. The reality is, and and obviously with sectoral consultations, including organized labor, many meetings with organized labor, and it's the challenge, as always, for all of us dealing with these issues is that it's impossible to consult with every single person, right? So you try to do it as best as you can, but I think the Commission will be the first to accept any criticism of that we haven't gone far enough, that there's more that we can do around that, and we can certainly take it out of this meeting. Maybe we can just chat afterwards and just get specific understanding of the particular constituency and see if there's a way for the Commission to accommodate that. In terms of the actual transition and the decarbonization issues, I just wanted to make a general point about this, which I think sometimes we get sort of tied up in all these climate conversations and discussions about the NDC and Europe, what is Europe doing and building what and whatever they're doing. And there's a lot of misinformation about what's happening in Europe right now. The real reason that the transition is happening in South Africa is not about climate change. It's happening because our coal stations, we are almost entirely reliant on our coal stations for electricity, and those coal stations are old and badly maintained, and they cannot give us energy security. The second part of that, what follows from that, is that renewable energy is now much cheaper. It's also cheaper than nuclear, much cheaper than nuclear. So that argument is almost, you almost cannot get past that, because from a state's point of view, when you're incurring public expenditure, you cannot spend money on things that are not value for money. That's what the Public Finance Management Act requires. So it really doesn't make any sense anymore to spend more money on any coal. Even fixing the old coal plants is no longer worth it. And we have all the many reports from many different research institutions confirming all of that. The next problem is that coal is actually killing people. It has been killing people for decades. There are thousands of people dying every year because of the emissions from coal plants. We cannot get past that. You heard earlier today what the Reverend was saying about the High Court has found that this is a constitutional violation. As government who's supposed to respect the Constitution, it cannot continue to do that. It has to phase that out. It cannot continue to kill people in this way. So in the fourth reason, which is probably the closest link to the climate issue, is the fact that not transitioning and continuing to rely on coal and other fossil fuels for our electricity and for use in our industry is that the export markets are closing. The North, you can fault them for all the reasons that you think it's unfair and all of that, but the reality of the matter is that it's going to affect South African export, it's going to affect our industry, and it's going to affect our workers in South Africa if we don't transition and are able to export those products. So on top of all of that, and I guess an additional benefit of the transition is that we are then able to also contribute towards our international obligations for reducing our carbon emissions. So I think sometimes people mess around a little bit with this information and they're not really speaking the truth about the real reasons why this is happening. So we get these arguments about climate change and it's not really our responsibility and we contribute so little. It's not really the reason the transition's happening. So after that soapbox, I think I'm going to, it's now time for lunch, so I'm going to ask us to conclude. We have got notes. We're going to take this forward. We didn't hear any strong views against the 350 kilowatt hour proposal that came out. It's quite a specific proposal that's come out. I didn't see people going, this is outrageous. So it's quite a nice practical thing that we could take forward as a recommendation from this group. So if you bitterly disagree, please come. We're going to stand here afterwards now and talk about that. And then we will be presenting this in the plenary after the lunch session. Okay, the key findings from all of this. If you have questions that are unanswered for Tracy, for anyone else, I'll just ask the commissioners to hang about for a few minutes. Please come and talk to us. That's part of what we're trying to do. Our mandate is to kind of build consensus around this issue, share the information that we have, make sure that people's questions are answered. So please do come and ask us. Comrade Sifiso, you have a last comment to make. Just very short, please, because I think people want to go
I
have
will
lunch.
be short program director like a miniskirt.
See, this is what worries me about giving you the microphone, but okay.
Look, program director, on my opening statement, I clearly said that It is a noble call that we all subscribe to. But however, we've raised concerns as organized labor to say the manner in which this agenda is taken forth, that's where our concern is. And not to say that we are misleading people and all of those things and all that. I think the whole process in itself, it's misleading. And if somebody would want us to be afraid not to say that, that is his own story. But we will say that. We are concerned. Our government is a consultative government. And it's an we have intergovernmental relations with national, provincial, and local. We're saying you have left behind, you have abandoned the very important stakeholder in this case, of which is the local government.
Yeah.
There are no proper consultations there. IDPs and what's his name in Bezos are the platforms where we consult our communities. But this particular topic of agenda is not touched. It's no longer there. It's not there. It has never been there. Now, who do you say then you would want to implement all of these things, and then you will then say, no, we've consulted people?
No,
It's not true.
We hear you, Comrade Sophie. So I see.
Lastly, on the recommendations, because last time I did not give recommendations, it's very
Okay,
important.
but please, could you just be brief?
To be brief, thank you, to be brief. No, Chair, you see, this is a working session. We must allow us to vent so that you can assist each other. If we will treat these processes as noodles, like 2-minute noodles, and microwave them, we're not going to have the great outcomes or results at the end of the day. We need to be patient with each other, Chair. Where I come from, we need to, and I'm from Mpumalanga, by the way. I'm affected. All these people that are talking here, they live here. I live in Mpumalanga. The sad part is that I produce electricity. I have coal mines in the municipalities, and those mines are in the municipalities. Those power stations are in the municipalities. When you speak of water, in the municipalities. Communities are where? In the municipalities. We're affected. Bring local government on board so that we can consult people. Chairman, the recommendations that I'm being mandated to at least submit is that, first and foremost, we say, look, as I've said, to say we support the energy, at least the energy mix. We're not saying rule out coal altogether. Coal it's here. It's a God-given resource. Let us use it. While using it, we say, we propose and support of the carbon capture projects to assist with the reduction of emissions. That's very important. We continue to use coal. We support coal-fired power stations and coal minings. We support coal-powered stations, and then we say we must, at least because, yes, you are, it's true that they are deteriorate, what is the correct English? Deteriorate, what? I always struggle with that one. Yes, but we are saying we must at least have a clear plan and try and assist in building the lifespan and extending the lifespan of those power stations so that we can at least secure the energy. And then we say we support the 2019 ERP. Very important. Thank you.
Thanks for those inputs. We appreciate that. May, did you want to respond to something?
Yeah, thanks, Commissioner. I just want to speak to the issue of local government. I am not here because I was made a favor. I want to clarify that. We are part of the commission as local government. We raised our voice when we were debating in one of the budget vote of the DFFE. We then recommended that the president must consider local government to form part of the Climate Change Commission. So we are here. I am not invited. I'm here as a commissioner. Yeah. And in everything that we are doing, I also raised the issue of Mpumalanga and the Eastern Cape. It's just that I did not speak to the municipality because I noted those municipalities. We are SALGA, we are working with all these municipalities, and we are going to continue to workshop our municipalities and capacitate them. Hence, we are lobbying that we must also be taken into account so that we got skills, because we do have people in municipalities, but they need to be reskilled, because what we are going to do it's not what they used to do in the past. So we must not come here with the notion that local government is not there. We are there as a sphere of local government. I might be from Tsolopil, but I am representing the spheres of local government. I am not only speaking for Tsolopil, I'm speaking for the whole sphere of local government. Hence, would always forever speak for Mpumalanga and Eastern Cape and any other province that is going to be affected badly by this. Let me also speak, I know that we've got constraints of time. Let me speak to the issues of the free basic services. It is not only electricity, even equally water, your refuse removal, and any other services that municipalities are rendering. Those services are subsidized through indigent, through equitable share. Now, I would engage the speaker that raised those issues to say we've got councillors, we've got ward committees, we've got the credit control department whereby all these things has to be raised. So I will impart some information to her so that when she goes back, she's then able to go and raise critical questions to say we've been told, because this is the process whereby we are dealing with the issues of the registration for indigent. And let me also raise this to say, in my municipality, we have amended our indigent policy to say all the elderly people, because the amount that covers indigent is about 2 elderly people staying together. We have said they are permanent indigenous. Equally, the child-headed families, we used to do it annually. Now we said they will be indigent for 3 years. That's the changes that we have made. So we'll share the information with everybody that is here, because equally, it is illegal for any institution of local government to scrap the free basic service, because that service is subsidized by national government. So I'm going to pause there, and I will engage from this platform. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that. And that will be the final word for this session. Thank you so much. As I say, the commissioners will be here, so come and speak to us. Thank you all for your inputs. We really appreciate your time. There'll be lunch. I think it's on this level outside. Edith, do you know the answer? No. So just outside here, I think there's maybe on that side. I'm not sure. Sorry, I don't know the answer to this, but it's outside of here. Thank you so much for your time, everybody. The session is closed.